What follows is a brief construction montage.
Late again.
Late again.
At limited time only. Flashback.
While Patchy pulls himself together, let's see how SpongeBob's party is shaping up.
End of flashback.
60 days earlier.
1 day earlier.
15 minutes ago.
1 minute and 7 seconds earlier.
Soon after.
Soon after.
Montage.
When they got to Elle's Bridge.
When they got to Av's video editor. Diana is back. Back in New York.
And so Caillou laid on the driveway until the ambulance could get him. While Caillou was rushed to the hospital, Boris got taken to jail by police.
When the troublemakers got home.
At the Tubester residence.
At the video store. At the video store. At the video store. At High Court. At Kurt Barrow's funeral.
Previously.
Yesterday. Meanwhile. Meanwhile. Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile.
Meanwhile still. Even more meanwhile.
Even more meanwhile.
Meanwhile, at the Krusty Krab. Meanwhile, back in the lowlands.
Meanwhile, deep in the kelp forest. Meanwhile, back on the Patrick Show.
Meanwhile, at the Handy Show. Would you please stop into me? It is starting to get very annoying.
Meanwhile at the airport.
Meanwhile, with the Hatsumikyu.
Meanwhile with Rosie.
Meanwhile, in the skies.
Meanwhile, at the Palace of King Poseidon, ruler of the seven seas.
Meanwhile, at the Palace of King Poseidon, ruler of the seven seas.
A few moments later.
A few moments later.
A few moments later.
A few moments later.
Moments later. Moments later. Moments later.
Moments later.
Many moments later. Many moments later.
Many moments later, until our Super Kitties are back for season 3.
Many unbearable moments later.
More moments later. A little later. A little later.
A while later. A little while later.
A VAR review later.
Not allowed later.
Not endangered later.
Not reloaded later.
Later. Later. Later.
Later. Later.
Later. Later. Later.
Later.
Later. Later.
Later. Later. Later.
Later.
Later.
Later.
Later.
Later.
Later.
Later. Later. Later. Later.
Later. In the void.
Later in the nap.
Negative later.
Abracalater.
Later at Chili's.
Later, after Kurt Barrow watched all episodes of the Game of Thrones complete seasons 1 to 7 box set on DVD. Later, after Dark Sledge Barrow watched all episodes of The Walking Dead, the complete season 6 on DVD. Later, after Shroom Barrow watched all episodes of The Weeds complete season 6 on DVD. Later, after Kurt Barrow made a grounded video out of Wendy O. Cooper and made a fake VHS opening to Diana from 1986 by Warner Brothers. Real, not fake. Later, after Dark Sledge Barrow made a grounded video out of Sonic and Amy Rose, and made a fake VHS opening to My Little Pony, Equestria Girls from 1998 by Viacom. Real, not fake.
Later, after Friends formed made a grounded video at Mexico and Diana, and made a fake VHS
Later, after Shrewborough made a grounded video out of Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man, and made a fake VHS opening to the My Little Pony movie from 1998 by 20th Century Fox. Real, not fake.
Later, when Mario got home.
Later, after the movie ended.
Later still.
Later that evening.
Happy friendiversary.
Later that same evening.
Later that day. Later that day. Later that same whoopsie-doodle day. Later that night. Later that night. Later that night. Later that night.
More laterer.
Much later.
Much later.
Much later.
Much later. Much later. Much later.
Much later.
Not much later.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting. And they have to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they have to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one. So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting, and they had to hire a new one.
So much later when they go to Henny's show and was restored the Henny show, and now everyone's sad.
So much later that everyone sold their free tickets to see Frozen, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, Cars 2, the Lego Movie and Shipwreck.
The following Wednesday. The following Thursday.
You get the idea.
Just then.
Just then, by sheer coincidence.
12 o'clock midnight.
12 o'clock midnight.
3:28 a.m. 6:24 a.m.
7:59 a.m.
3 o'clock is in the afternoon.
4 o'clock in the afternoon.
8:01 p.m.
8:01 p.m.
1 nanosecond later. 1 second later. 3 seconds later. Back in time.
5 seconds later.
6 seconds later.
10 seconds later.
10 seconds later.
12 seconds later. 12 seconds later.
13 seconds later. 20 seconds later in the night.
30 seconds later.
37 seconds later. 37 seconds later.
37 seconds later. 47 seconds later. A few seconds later. A few seconds later. 1 minute later. 1 minute later.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
2 minutes later. 2 very boring minutes later.
3 minutes later.
4 minutes later.
5 minutes and 49 seconds later.
5 minutes later. 5 minutes later. 5 minutes later.
5 minutes later.
5 minutes later.
5 minutes later.
5 minutes later.
10 minutes later. 10 minutes later.
10 minutes later.
11 minutes later.
11 minutes later. 11 minutes later.
13 minutes later.
15 minutes later.
15 minutes later.
2 minutes later.
20 minutes later.
20 minutes later.
20 minutes later.
22 minutes later.
26 minutes later.
30 minutes later.
35 minutes later.
A few minutes later.
A few minutes later. A little longer than a few minutes later. Many minutes later.
Many minutes of burnout recording Lizzie Rena performing graceful parallel down.
A half hour later.
1 hour later.
1 call hour later. 1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later. 1 hour later. 1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later. 1 hour later. 1 hour later. 1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later. 1 hour later.
1 hour later.
1 hour later before they go to Henny show. 1 hour later before they go to Wah Boo Boo show. 1 hour before they go to beach.
1 hour later, before they go to Golden Coral.
60 minutes and 53 seconds later. 1 hour and 5 minutes later. 80 minutes later.
1 hour 37 minutes 12 seconds later.
2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later. 2 hours later.
2 hours later.
2 hours later.
2 hours later.
2 cubic hours later.
Tuan baliva bazaos later.
152 minutes later.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
3 hours later. 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 3 hours later.
3 hours later.
5 hours later. 5 hours later. 346 minutes later.
Oh, 6 hours later.
6 hours later. 6 hours later. 6 hours later. 6.5 hours later. 7 hours later.
7.5 hours later.
8 hours later. 8 hours later.
8 hours later.
8.5 hours later.
9 hours later. 10 hours later.
Unfortunately, 10 hours later.
Approximately 10 hours later. 12 sleepless hours later.
12 sleepless hours later.
14 hours later. Several hours later. A few hours later.
A few hours later, the doorbell rang. Caillou went to answer it, only to find that the police were looking for him.
Several hard-hitting hours later. Several soda-fueled hours later. Several song-filled hours later. Many 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 hours of fun time later. Many adorable hours later. Many boring hours of cleaning later. Many chilly hours later. Many unbearable hours later.
So many hours later.
Tomorrow for sure.
Tomorrow for sure.
Tomorrow for math class. 24 hours later. 24 hours later. 24 sleepless hours later. Early the next morning. Stupid early the next morning. 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 The next morning.
The next morning.
The next morning. The next morning. The next the next morning. 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 The next morning.
The next morning, like every morning.
The next morning, like every morning.
35 hours later. 37 hours later.
The next day. 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 The next day.
The next day.
The next day.
The next day.
The next day in a parallel universe. The very next day. The following day. Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
The very next evening. The next evening. The next evening. The next Christmas. The next level.
The next Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day. The next St. Patrick's Day. The next St. Patrick's Day.
The next Thanksgiving.
Days later. 1 day later. 1 full day of fatherly fun later. Day 2.
48 hours later.
48 hours later. 2 days later.
2 days later. It was...
2 days later, it was the day.
Day 3. 72 hours later. 3 days later. 3 days later. 3 days later. 3 days later. Day 4. 4 to 6 days later. 4 to 6 more days later. 6 messy days later. 7 days later. Several 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 long days later. Many disorderly days later. 1 week 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 later. 1 smelly week later. 1 soggy week later. 1 feeling week later. 1 weekend of pampering later. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later.
16 paranoia-filled days later.
16 paranoia-filled days later. 3 weeks later. 3 idiotic weeks later.
3 weeks later.
3 weeks later when Zara got grounded for getting expelled.
3 weeks later. 4 to 6 weeks later. With 4 to 6 really imitate weeks. 6 to 8 weeks later. Several weeks later. Several weeks later.
7 soggy weeks later.
6 months later. 6 months later.
6 months later!
6 stinky months later. 7 months later. Several months later. Several months later.
60 days later.
Many months later.
Many months later.
Many months later after Viacom and Screen Gems eat pizza.
682 days
Of soggy.
later.
1 year later.
1 Hawaii years later.
2 years later.
12 years later.
41 Hawaii years later.
70 years later. 73 Hawaii years later. 75 years later.
77 years later.
77 years later.
Would you please stop interrupting me? It is starting to get very annoying.
278 years later.
573 years later.
693 years later. 2,000 years later.
2,000-ish years later. 3,000 years later.
3,000 years later.
4,000 years later.
4,000-ish years later.
5 billion years later.
100 million days later.
An eternity later. An eternity later. 1 eternity later. Opening night. A couple of hours later. A lot of boring math later.
A lot of wallpapers later.
Very boring walks later.
Ton of fractal arts later.
A ton of O-toodles later. Shut up. Many frame building attempts later. Many heartfelt traditions later. Many attempts to fix the past later. Many amusements later.
Many buckets later.
Many exam questions later. Many invitations later. Many meeps later. Many meeps later. Many memories later. Many miles later. Many repressed memories later. Many plays later. Many superstitions later. Many tic-tacs later. Many secret parties later. Many versions later.
Many wishes later.
Many painful holes later. Many, many toys later. Many, many, many forks later. Much tranquility later.
Much profanity later.
One unnecessary time skip later.
One bus ride later. One humongous meal later. One semester later. One season later. One entree later. One debt to society later. One journey through space later. One very long digestive tract later.
One load screen later.
One loading screen later. One loading screen later. One little boost to the surface later.
One mini game later.
One pathetic sob story later. One frozen wasteland later. One long angry line later. One beautiful Christmas morning later. One movie later. One shift later. One shift later. One extremely annoying shift later. One wiener later. One nap later. One nap later. One operation later. One pair of pants later.
One pair of pants later.
One scary rot later.
One trip to the emergency room later.
To stupid things later.
Two idiots later.
Three annoying songs later.
4 wolfies later.
5 soggies later.
8 semesters later.
12 requiems later.
58 corruptions later.
67 gooning sessions later. 73 spinnings later. 82 kilometers later. 200 whoopsies later. 237 hoes later.
242 explosions later.
298 frozen patties later.
399 kawais later.
800 kajillion potatoes later. Thousands of tears later. 3,000 whoop-whoos later. 5,000 celebrities later. 6,000 unos later.
12000 questions later.
Would you please stop imitating me? This is starting to get very annoying.
60,000 goals later.
80,000 impressions later.
Would you please stop imitating me? It is starting to get very annoying. 1 million, zillion, jillion, dillion, cotillion times later.
A few inches later.
A few searches later.
Eventually. Several bad puns later.
Several bad puns later.
Several bouquets later. Several thousand ripped pants later.
Some time later.
Even more boat building attempts later. Graduation day. What if SpongeBob was gone? 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 You wanna smash, brother? You wanna smash, brother? You wanna smash, brother? Wanna smash, brother? Wanna smash, brother? You wanna smash, brother? Ooh la la ba ma shamatama oyama lama ba. Ooh la la ba ma shamatama oyama lama ba. Ooh Alabama shamatama oyama lama ba.
La la ba ma shamatama oyama lama ba.
Ooh la la ba ma shamatama oyama lama ba.
Man!
Ooh la la ba ma shamatama oyama lama ba.
Oh, just put it in at this point, man.
Oh, just put it in at this point, man.
Oh, just put it in at this point, man.
Oh, just put it in at this point, man. Oh, just put it in at this point, man.
When will Ganon get buffed?
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 Shut up!
First lesson, shape-shifting. Next lesson, staring. Haunting houses. Last lesson, how to pick things up.
Epilogue. Epilogue. After the step family did her dirty, again.
You will get the idea.
The kids will love it. What the
Get the out!
Same nada. Same nada.
I'll go stun the killer! Rah! I'll go stun the killer! Rah! I'll go stun the killer! Rah! I'll go stun the killer! Rah!
I'll go stun the killer! I'll go stun the killer!
You are ugly! Rah!
Did they patch the bypass method?
IDFB2 will be coming in 2026.
And you play the sousaphone?
No, I am not! Please! That's it! You're grounded for 67,676,767 years!
Tell, find the mail.
No, I am not! Please? That's it. You're grounded for 484,737 years. Go to your room right now.
The is going to the title cards. I'll get ya. When the next update?
How dare you destroy the time cards! Grrr! How dare you destroy the time cards!
Tips and tricks. Fire in the hole. I like to say bad words. Sorry for the bad words.
I will fight you! Oh, Toodles!
Shut up. Wait, this is 2026! Why are we still saying this?
I hate you, Candy Cake Heat. English. Or Spanish.
Man is goated! Jacobs sucks!
Alright, bro, where's my league winner money?
What league money? Oh my god.
Get the f*** out!
Get out of my kitchen!
Oh no, the great meme reset isn't working. Nitrogen monoxide. Yeah, boy.
Wobbly wiggly wobbly wiggly wobbly wiggly wobbly wiggly wobbly wiggly wobbly.
When Labubu is destroying the town.
I'll go stun to the bass mater! Shut the f*** up!
Years of months has been failed. I hate Vor. It's bad.
Oh my goodness, Valentine?
Oh my goodness, Valentine. Fuck this shit, man. I'm tired of waiting.
Brief construction montage. No, not the brief construction montage!
I am gay for Kirk.
Stop. You have no idea, later.
That's all, folks.
Did somebody say pizza?
Game over!
I'm ready 2 days later, 4,000 years later.
I don't believe in magic! I don't believe in magic! I don't believe in magic! Oh no! The end!
Let me at him, Pop! Let me at him! Let me at him! Let me...
I don't get it.
The end.
This is a family show.
The end is so itchy! Many, blowing up the whole earth for shame. Prison! Yes, hello? I'll take your heaviest object.
Try jiggling the antenna.
Oh, I can see my house from here!
Time! Everybody say Merry Christmas!
sorts of different directions. I hope you all enjoyed it.
It sure is good to be back. Hey, PA! I'll have the usual.
Mud espresso coming right up.
And so ends another exciting episode of The Patrick Star Show. The end.
Not responsible for shattered teeth.
Oh, Ice King! We miss you so!
Why, Neptune? Why?
We had overdue books too. Going on.
Going on!
There's still time to do a show today.
Only if I could work with my favorite director and sister.
Make me sick.
The end is correct! We have a winner!
I'm banishing you to the Shadow Realm.
Much better.
Man, I will fight you!
Today's forecast is 10.
We hope you enjoyed this brief construction montage.
You hope you enjoyed the spoiler alert.
Stop swearing!